Hey guys, what's going on? Andrew coming at you, and this is what I'm going to talk about how I view the Republican Party after living in Sweden or in Europe. This video is going to be tough because no matter what I do, I'm going to alienate some people. But I feel like there's some people in the middle that are going to watch this, and I hope that you can just listen to my idea, and I encourage you to listen to other things. Listen to conservative things, listen to democratic things, and make your own conclusion. And I'm all for freedom of speech, but let's get into this. I have a bit of a confession to make, and not that I'm embarrassed about this or anything, but when I was a kid, I was like a really big conservative. I would say I was more in line with like libertarianism, as like I was a libertarian in a sense, because I didn't care like what anyone else did, but I really liked conservative like politics. I was a conservative myself. I watched Fox News. I would read like Bill O'Reilly books. And I just was interested in it. It just happened to be what I chose to watch, which was Fox News growing up. And no one in my family was like really conservative or whatever. They just let me do my own thing. And it wasn't until I like went to college or university that I started to challenge a little bit of my way of thinking. And now there weren't professors telling me how to think like you always hear in the news and stuff, but like I just was around more different groups of people. Like one of the reasons I moved to Sweden is because I made friends with so many people from around the world. I had a roommate that was from Turkey and just like from a different culture. It was so fun to see. Made friends from Europe, Saudi Arabia, and it just opened up my eyes. And as I was finishing school, I was like, all right, I gotta just jump on an airplane and try this. So I came to Sweden. Now, I bounced back back and forth from being conservative and to being like liberal. It's like a little bit of a pendulum with me. And there were times when I was first in Sweden where I probably still leaned a little bit more conservative in a sense, like when this culture war was going on. But I never cared about what anyone did with their life. Like I wanted LGBTQ people to be happy. I thought it was silly that anyone cares what anyone else does. I just was watching this culture war happening basically. And it wasn't until like a few years in Sweden where you start to see like how society works here, and you realize as an American, sometimes you're just being gypped. You know, when you graduate school to work in education like I did, and you start paying your tuition bills, and you start seeing friends and people you know that like maybe they get sick or they get cancer and they can't afford to pay their medical bills, and you live in a country where when I was in the States, everybody would talk about socialism and talk about Venezuela and talk about Cuba and the devastation of socialism. And anytime you would ever want to talk about publicly funding healthcare, publicly funding and taking care of people with a strong safety social net, and when you live in a country like Sweden, which is, I would say, a democratic socialist country, meaning that like there's a lot of public funding going into it, but it definitely is a capitalistic country. It's a misconception that this is the case when you hear these conservatives talk. And I started to go through the healthcare system, and there's been a few times I needed to see doctors or go to the emergency room. And I will admit there can sometimes be longer waits, but at the same time, like everything seemed to work pretty smoothly. I even tried to take a university class here in Sweden, and it was free. And the more and more I started to look at things, I was like, wow, this publicly funding stuff isn't so bad. You don't have to stress in the same way. You know, like if I lose my job, if something happens, you're going to be taken care of. Going back to America, where in a lot of cases, people are just struggling to survive. So that started to happen. And then what led to me really making a shift in how I have to speak out a little bit on the Republican Party is definitely the last 2 years. When I saw this shift that changed, my biggest regret is that I didn't speak up sooner. Now, if you were a conservative, I don't have a problem with you, but I had friends and people I knew that were like minority and like LGBTQ, and they saw something happen in America that wasn't good. And I kept saying, hey, gay marriage is legalized in the US. Nobody cares anymore. We're moving forward with our lives. And my biggest regret is I didn't understand what they were seeing happening in America. Now, again, I'm not saying everybody that's a conservative feels this way, but there's elements within the Conservative Party that's, toxic, just like there is on the Democratic side. I get it. But I started to listen more and more to like conservatives talk, and I started to realize more and more a lot of these big conservative thinkers that I was following on television, they wouldn't really debate people on the left that were like considered really smart, really intelligent. You know, they would debate college kids on the college campus. And for example, I think you can know who I'm talking about there. And they would just keep regurgitating the same talking points and then not really having a discussion. And I began to get frustrated because I feel like a lot of I feel like the Conservative Party is dead, but hear me out. I do not think the current Conservative Party, the way it is set up, it's already a bit split and broken because of everything that happened. They will not get elected again unless they change a little bit. They kind of have to get more cool, if you will. They have to get more accepting of more different groups of people. And I'm not saying that everybody in the party is that way, but like they need more people to vote, and they're going to have to change their principles on some things. Now, I would have to sit overseas and watch all these embarrassing things happen. For example, I often thought to myself, like, why do people care like what bathroom somebody uses or what they need to do to be happy? And that really bothered me a lot, and I started to like not like what the current conservatives were doing. But on top of that, for me, like climate change, watching what's happening, I mean, we can just see what happened in Germany. There are still people denying climate change. And I honestly think that that is the biggest crisis we are facing right now. Open your eyes, look around. It's happening. We have to do something about it. And the more and more I look at the Conservative Party, I just feel like it's back in time. And although their base has gotten bigger and grown, if you're making less than $230,000 a year, I don't know why you would vote conservative, because you're voting against your own self-interest. And that doesn't mean that I'm in love with Democrats either. Like, I'm not necessarily a fan of everything that Democrats have done. And I think they have failed in a lot of places. And I think that that's one of the reasons we saw all the changes in the political climate in the States. But to me, I just see the Republican Party as like uncool, stuck in the past, and keeping America a little bit stagnant and stopping people from growing. And I'm hopeful that the Conservative Party can kind of like, I don't know, I guess expand, grow. But the perfect situation would be if the Republican Party split. And I think this is going to happen because there's regular, reasonable conservatives, I believe. And then there's like the crazies. And I think they should split. And they don't want to split because obviously they would lose their power and control. But the perfect situation would be if you had like an ultra conservative, a not as conservative, and then if the Democratic Party also split. I think this would change and move forward and together. But the last thing that has really bugged me is how like the current situation with getting, you know, a shot, if you will, or a vaccine has caused all this outrage and craziness and people to like deny what's happening. And like, I had COVID twice and I don't understand how people don't think it's real. I'm not going to tell you you have to go out and get a vaccine or anything else, but like to deny that it's real or a big deal, I just don't understand. Because like, to me, like anytime I looked at the last pandemic we had in like 1918, people always say, oh, it only kills 1% of the population or whatever. It always kind of blew my mind because if you looked at the 1918 pandemic, it killed 2% of the population and ended up killing around like 50 million people, if not way, way more. I mean, there's debates about how many millions of people died, but it was an insane amount of the population that died. And that's how numbers work, you know? Had people not done anything, we would have had higher numbers. So for me, I guess I just care more about social issues than I used to. I just want people to be happy. But I also think that people aren't taken care of enough in the United States. And this big boogeyman of taking care of people and giving them healthcare is silly to me. This idea that it's going to ruin America if we treat people better and give them more education and more funding. And sometimes I imagine or think to myself, maybe they're a bit afraid of people being like better educated, or going to university, because when you start to be around different groups of people, you challenge and change your perspective. So I guess the biggest thing that Sweden has done to me is, even though I considered myself to still be an independent, is I'm not scared by socialism woven into a democracy. And I just can't take the Republican Party seriously anymore until they change. So that's just my opinion, and I know I'm going to make some people mad or whatever, but I got to stay true to me. I don't hate anybody on any side. You're free to tell me why I'm right or wrong, but that's why I kind of stopped being conservative. All right, I'll see you in the next one.